Okay, well, hey, folks, thank you very much for everyone coming out to see us today for our Cybersecurity Fireside Chat. We appreciate, first of all, everybody taking time out of your day, and I really do understand because, a lot of folks have commitments later in the day, but to come here for a few hours and really hear from an excellent panel of folks from our school districts and then thought leaders. We hope that this will be very informative to you. So first of all, what I want to do really quickly here is just introduce the panel and most importantly, our moderator. Okay. We went through and we had to, who are we going to pick to be a moderator? Well, I eliminated everybody from Sedara pretty quickly because A, they're not that good looking. Then it was like, well, how about Campese? I don't want him either. Then all of a sudden I said, Bridget, yeah, she can do it. And she was more than kind to do it. Thank you. So, obviously, I just introduced Bridget. Okay, everybody, and that's what's really kind of neat about this here is I think everybody kind of knows each other. So we actually blew off the name tags pretty much too. But from our staff from the school districts, obviously everyone knows Brian Zimmer, Director of Educational Technology at Webster School District. Cindy Gorley, Director of Technical Services for HFL, and going to be here for a little while longer with us. Yeah, it's so cool. And Eric Jordan, Director of Technology Services for Brighton Central School District. So those obviously are going to be on our panel folks, from the school district side. Then from our subject matter experts, we have Alan Winchester, partner from Harris Beach, and the cybersecurity practice there. We have Derek Kistich, who is he never likes me to say this, but I don't really care. He's one of our founders at Sedara, and he's also a principal security strategist, which is incredibly important. And then we have Dilip Singh. And we made sure that we hired Dilip, obviously, because he has the coolest beard in America. No doubt about that. A couple other folks that we have here in the audience, Michelle Ryan from BOCES. I also want to introduce a gentleman, John Simpson, in the back. John is from Logarithm, which from the technology side of our SIM practice, we partner exclusively with Logarithm, and they are an awesome partner for us. And Mike Campese from Citras. So I think we all pretty much know each other. What I'd like to do now is just to go over pretty much just an agenda here. Okay, what we're going to try to do today. Okay, the first thing is as soon as I'm done here, I'm going to turn it over to Derek. And Derek's going to talk a little bit of why did Sedara get into K through 12? And why is that so important to us as a company? Then we get, once Derek's completed, then we get into the panel discussion. And that's truly what you're here to really talk about and, with these folks. And after we're done with the panel discussion, then we're going to move over and talk a little bit about risk reduction concepts around cybersecurity insurance, audits, ransomware a little bit. And so I think, we've got some great people here. After that, the next thing is actually kind of important, okay, I feel. And I'll be running around with I don't run anywhere, but I'll be walking around with a mic, okay? And this is really important, is we really want you folks to answer questions, ask questions, because we'll do the answering on those. But the real fact is it's a great opportunity to talk a little bit and really get in as deep or as weeds, whatever you'd like to do. We have the folks here, so please engage. From there, we're going to do a little bit of Jeopardy, which is always a lot of fun. And then Michelle's going to close out the session for us with a few words from the BOCES side, which is truly, they've been an awesome partner with us. And then, well, the good news is we'll have food and top shelf liquor, That was my contribution to the whole thing. So that's going to be the afternoon. And hopefully we'll get everyone out, on time and that they can get back to their families. So why don't I turn this over to Derek?
All right, so thanks again for coming. As Felix said, my name is Derek. I've been fortunate enough to be one of the founders at Sedara. We've been doing cybersecurity services for the better part of 10 years at this point. When we started, Sedara was really founded on the principles of bringing best practice security services to organizations. But about 10 years ago, the industry was quite different. And back then, we did a lot of technology implementation. A lot of it was focused on products and focused on the technology and focused on just using the tools for security. There wasn't a lot of practices and policies and procedures around it. And what we saw over a period of time, and by that I mean over the period of about 3 or 4 years, we did pretty close to 1,500 implementations for different organizations. And we're talking dozens and dozens of K through 12 districts, several dozen higher ed, and a lot of other organizations across the world. What we had seen was just that there's a big focus on buying a tool, putting it in place, and hoping it did well from a security perspective. And what we seem to see year after year is that it wasn't working. It was really about putting the tool in, and then you'd kind of forget about it and come back in 6 or 7 months. And so we just started to develop a practice around a practice around processing technology, and what we now call a program. And what we really tried to do with that, and we're doing today, and Dilip, as many of you know, have talked with us, talked with Dilip, and these folks here have been helping or have been involved in living that program, is that it's not about technology. It should almost never be about technology. It should really be about really a vision, a view of what you're trying to achieve, and from a security perspective, but also compliance perspective, and bridging the gap between technology and the rest of the departments in an organization. So that's what we say, is it's about people, it's about processes, it's about culture. It should really never be about choosing a technology and just making that the clear focus. So that's what we really did when we sat down to come up with what we call the Cybersecurity Development Program. Is look at the frameworks that are available, and today it's obviously ed law has kind of governed the frameworks that we use, which is great. But the reality is, you have to take a step back and look at the wider picture, and look at all the different angles and all the different people and all the different departments that are affected when you look at a program like this. And so that's what we've really tried to do here. That's also why, when we look at this program, that we make it flexible. That it's about CISO services and strategy, but it's also about being able to push in and out of technology, because what we did see is that there was also a lot of organizations that were focused on just the strategy, or just an audit, or just a risk assessment. And then you get a report from that, and then great, we read the report, and again, 6, 7 months goes by and we don't do anything about it, because it's not top of mind, it's not integrated with the rest of our practices. So what we did with this program is really develop an approach to push in and out of that, to say, all right, well, if we have to go, we're not going to spend 1 month doing an audit and build a report. We're going to go section by section, focus on the most important risks first, and organize them, and help actually deliver them, help implement them, and help do it in a way that makes it repeatable, makes it sustainable, and makes it effective for an organization. And what that really means is that it's a little bit different for everybody, because different organizations operate a little bit differently, and the underlying principles need to be the same, but it still needs to come back to the concepts of people and process and technology, and bringing all of those together. So we spent the better part of 4 or 5 years at this point really developing a program like this. And hope you folks see the value in it, and I hope to continue to develop that, because that's really what it's about, is continuing to make it better and better, make it easier and more effective and more repeatable, and in that way we can deliver an effective cybersecurity program, but also a program that will help allow us to be compliant with deadlock, compliant with all the other regulations that inevitably are just going to continue to come down the pipeline. So. Jumping ahead. Back to Bridget, thanks.
Perfect. So as they asked for a moderator, I was like, wait, I just have to ask the questions? They're like, yeah, I'm like, anybody who knows me knows I can ask questions all day long. It was the answers that were going to be the problem that I needed to come up with, which is exactly why we have our districts represented here and our thought partners. So thank you for this chance. So I'm going to start on this side of the room, right? When we think about the questions that either you've grappled with or are grappling with continuously, what business and technical challenges were you facing as a district with respect to cybersecurity? And Brian, why don't we start with you?
Sounds good. So first of all, welcome. One of the challenges that Webster faced, when we started looking at NIST and we started looking at EdLaw 2D, about 3.5 years ago, I lost a lot of sleep wondering how we were going to be able to do this. From the mere sense of, I have a team of 7 people that are very talented, but I can't add more onto them. And so we were already running very, very thin with a one-to-one well before COVID. We were trying to do major upgrades to our servers. We were trying to do major upgrades to our full systems. We were being inundated with being asked to do more things, take care of the HVAC system under the network. We were being asked to do security things from the physical security sense. And it got to a point where I first of all, didn't feel like I knew enough about the right questions to ask for our team, but also knew that I couldn't ask my people to do even more because they were already spread so thin. So started meeting with Sedara, and we met for several months before we came to a proposal, just for the mere sense of we needed to make sure it was about the right things for Webster. And it really, to go back to what Derek was said about the people and the culture, we needed to make sure that it met the people, my team, and also the people in the district to really provide a cybersecurity program that's super secure and it's really moving us forward. And it's been extremely beneficial up to this point.
Great. How about you, Cindy?
Pretty much a lot about what Brian just said. We're a very small district compared to Webster. We do have 6 technicians. They're awesome. But trying to I guess it was trying to get my head wrapped around really what we needed to do, and that was hard enough. And then trying to explain that to my team and explain it to the admin team, it just kept getting bigger and bigger. And I knew that we could do a lot of things, but and like Brian said, we're into all the HVAC stuff. We cover so many pieces of things in technology that adding one more thing was just not going to be possible. And to be honest, I didn't know where to start. So that's, again, we spent, I don't know how many hundreds of meetings we had with Sedara trying to figure out just the right way to go and what path to take. But I had some really good people at the table with us at Central Office Administration. So it really helped to, I know that's a later question about how they're involved, but it was just way more than I thought we could handle alone.
Eric, anything more?
Yeah, a lot of the same things. For me, the conversation started off around EdLaw 2D, and then I was focused around being the DPO, what does that mean, what do we have to do, but that's just one small part of the overall cybersecurity. I'm by no means a cybersecurity expert. I'll never be. So looking for guidance has been a huge benefit through this. Knowing that we have an end game, we have a goal to develop a program that makes this compliance not only for student data, but every aspect of our organization. And it's one of the biggest takeaways that I've had, and it comes up quite regularly, is that this is just not an IT problem. It's an everyone problem. Everybody's got to be a part of this to make it successful.
I mean, definitely it sounds like the size of the ask, the impact of the ask, as well as the prioritization of it was like consistent throughout. Was there an event outside of EdLaw 2D that triggered your decision to improve your cybersecurity program, Cindy?
Well, I think a lot of things were in the news that kind of prompted us, hoping, it's not going to happen to HFL. And, like what Brian said, we'd stay awake at night figuring out, is this going to happen to us? And what's going to be the next thing that comes to us? And just knowing that, like Eric said, none of us are cybersecurity experts. That's not what we were hired to do. So knowing that I didn't have enough information or have the ability to do it by myself or even with my team was really what brought it to a head.
Eric, any event for you?
We're fortunate not to have any cyber events, but along the same lines, there were enough events out there that we knew we wanted to not have an event or be thrown out there as as a case study.
Good way to say it.
You know, and ultimately for me, it came down to, I was in Jamaica and we all got notified of the Ames web data breach, and not really having a full understanding of why that occurred, how it could have occurred, and you know, then it made me think about what else is going on in our district that I have no clue about. And then as we start to peel the layers back, that's where I've lost the rest of my hair. I sleep even less, probably like these guys, just because we're opening up so many cans of worms as we continue to improve on, you know, those what if questions, as well as the potential of the risk that's still out there for all of us on a day-to-day basis.
I'm not a good multitasker. Sorry.
We can push the button if you want.
I was like, oh, I've got that. I screwed it up on question 2. Okay.
You're on 4 now.
See?
Should have Michelle click and
So
then.
I can't be behind me. So Brian, what challenges do data privacy officers face when trying to garner support for their operations from their board?
Ultimately, I think when the data privacy officer position came out, and as the boards were looking for the right person, they just assumed that the technology director was the right person. None of us are attorneys, none of us are compliance officers, so we took the job knowing that it was much more than just vetting software. And a lot of the conversations that happened for board members initially and for superintendents was around, you know, we're going to have to do all this vetting of software work and contracts. And no one really ever had the conversation, or from the feedback that I got from our board as well as our superintendent, that they really understood the other side of NIST. That really the work that we're doing right now is around NIST. It's really not around vetting of contracts. And so there was a huge flip of funnel. And even for our technology directors, we had many meetings where we talked about vetting of contracts. Really is not about that. The work that we're doing to keep our district safe is really about the cybersecurity framework and all of those core key components that we need to do in order to help us move forward. And, you know, our board has been really great, you know, and they understand. We meet with them on a yearly basis to give them an update, but, you know, I still don't think that our boards know the whole impact of, you know, the potential of a Victor incident or a cybersecurity incident, of what that's going to entail for what it's going to mean financially, what it's going to mean for the culture of the district. And so for us, we're trying to do a lot of training, but as our boards are transient, we're trying to also make sure that they're being trained as well on the language and the needs to help move them forward, you know, if an incident does occur and when it does occur.
I think that the great thing is that I've had a lot of support from our central office. So central office meeting with the board kind of has prepared them for what's been coming. And they're all, you know, they all deal with it in their own jobs or in their own life. They know what cybersecurity is. They know, well, I don't know if they actually know all the pieces and parts that we have to do, but they know that something bad could happen and they don't want it to happen to us. So they've been very supportive in, you know, they don't want to hear a lot about the details. They just want to know that we're doing something to protect HFL. So they've really been awesome in supporting us.
I can't speak specifically to our board, but I know we're a little behind where Webster is in their program. But I can say, working with our central office staff, we've had 100% support with the program. You know, the more you pull people in, it looks like more work to do, more challenges. I don't have time to meet, but we've had a lot of buy-in from our different central office groups. That's usually where data starts, or the most data resides, whether it's employee data, student data. And we're really focused on who has access to what right now, and to just ensure that we match the right access to the right people. I think we'll get there. I have no doubt that our board would be 100% supportive of all of this work that we're doing in conjunction with working with Sedara.
Brian, what were some of the decision factors that led you to work with Sedara on the cybersecurity development program?
It really, for us, it came down to 2 factors. The first factor was Dilip and his team. When we first met with them, you know, we started through a lunch and learn at BOCES. Really provided a lot of great information, and that's when all the stuff was coming out about EdLaw 2D. It was very, very new. There were so many different layers that we had to think about and really try to dive into and understand. Really felt that they came out and, besides their culture approach, that it was, instead of them working for us, they're working with us. So they've become embedded in the Webster culture. Not only are they there every Thursday, we spend a lot of time with our team. They're out, they know our central office staff. They're an extension of our team, and they're not this standalone approach that we're doing. The other piece that really that made the sale for me was the programmatic piece of the long-term look. We are doing so much work and in-depth work with our team that Dilip can provide an idea, and not only can provide the idea, but he's given feedback on how we do the work. Many of the other companies that we talked to were just, here's what our thoughts are, here's our audit, now you got to go and do the work. I don't know if I'm doing the right work, and I don't know if that's the right course of action. Just based on what you're saying on a piece of paper, they're actually validating, we're going through the process to say, we're gonna implement this, we're gonna evaluate it, and now we're gonna come back and test it. So we've got this multi-approach phase where we're constantly working, and we're constantly that circle evolution to make sure that everything's working, and if something doesn't work, we're tweaking it. And so we're able to constantly evolve, into practices that are more secure, that we can repeat all the time. Right now we're doing a lot of server work based on our risks that we found in our audit. They're helping us do the work. So we know that it's industry-led. It's industry-based practices and the best practices that are out there. My team knows those practices, but we aren't Websterizing it. We're doing what's industry best standard. And that's much different to me, where we can, if we have an incident, we can go and say, we're doing exactly what NIST is saying, based on the professionals that do the work. Like everybody has said, I'm not a cybersecurity professional. I was a music teacher by trade, to an administrator, to a tech director. So we're learning as we go, and we're also trying to do the best that we can in order to keep our districts 100% safe all the time.
Eric, how about you? How about Brighton?
I keep saying, to start off by saying we're not cybersecurity experts, so it's been wonderful to have. It was an easy decision for me after meeting with Brian early on with Sedara to say, this is not a one and done thing. It's not you just spit out this is what we're going to do. It's a give and take relationship with in every aspect of the organization, in terms of who has access, why. It means more to me to have, it's not me saying it, it's us saying that, and we can align that to standards. It's not Eric trying to make everybody's life miserable because they can't install programs anymore, or now I got to type in a code every time I log in from outside the district. It's not me making people's lives miserable. We're rolling this out in a thoughtful way to say we're really protecting because of EdLaw, because of everything, all the data that's out there. And we're learning more and more. Every single week that we meet together with Dilip, we learn more and more about what we need to do. And we're getting there. It's fun because we're actually making progress. It's making our lives a lot easier.
How about for HFL, Cindy?
Well, we're not as far along as Webster. We've only been with Sedara since April or May, but realizing the lift of what we had to do, again, we couldn't do it ourselves. We thought about hiring somebody like a district employee to help us do this work, and realized that wasn't even going to help us get it done effectively or efficiently, and that what Sedara brings to the table is continued knowledge of what's happening out there. And we all know it's changing all the time. So having that, and like Brian said, there was that camaraderie of having them be part of our team. Dilip comes every Thursday. I wish he'd stay all day, but he only comes for half a day. But he's met with central office staff. He came to our leadership team retreat to meet all the players at the table. He's had individual meetings with all of them. It's just that being involved in what happens in HFL and being part of that team is what's really helped, I think, get buy-in from administrators, from other, from staff, because they see him too. He's come to faculty meetings, and getting the buy-in from my team that they're there not just to tell him what to do and make us, oh, now you have to do this or you have to do that. He's right there doing it with them, and giving us new ideas and helping us know the right thing to do. So we're not as far as Webster as far as having a long-range plan. I hope we get there soon, but yeah.
Perfect. In regards to working with Sedara, what steps were taken to build consensus within senior leadership for the cybersecurity program? Eric.
Yeah, I think it was a combined effort. I think it started with the fact that we couldn't do this on our own. We couldn't start with, it was overwhelming even since Law 2D came out and then was postponed. I was sweating, staying up at night. I didn't know where to begin. I had no idea where to wrap my head around this. We tried to create internal groups to meet with in our district to kind of get through some of it, and just with a lens on Law 2D. But then once we started uncovering it, we realized that there was data everywhere. There was processes and procedures outside of Law. It was a bigger picture. Then it became just like, okay, this is an Law 2D thing, to, oh my God, this is a whole district problem. Not a problem, but it's a challenge to get all of these different groups and people who have been there a long time, used to doing things their own way, storing their own files in their own places, not knowing where they were taking those files or using those files or who was accessing those files. So it was back to that overwhelming sense of not knowing how to proceed. Then it was I think it was timing-wise, Sedara came into the picture, and it sounded like a perfect fit for what we needed, because we presented that, and it was a very easy sell for our admin team, luckily, and everybody is sharing a part of that, a part of the program, and it's not just a one and done, it's a living program that's going to live in the district for a long time, well past me.
How about Webster Steps?
I think in addition to what Eric said, for our administrators not knowing really what this meant, we spent a lot of time with the educational pieces to really explain to them what happens if we have a cybersecurity incident. We were seeing it happen throughout the country. New York State hadn't been publicizing them as much as states like Texas, California. So for me, I've always liked to live in the land of fear sometimes, where you scare people a little bit, and then that helps jumpstart our conversations. For me, I've always told our superintendents that my goal is to keep Webster out of the news, and we have to put practices in place in order to do that. So we started really defining as a team between myself, our business official, and our superintendent at the time, what were some of our biggest challenges that we had as a district. Some of them were physical security. Some of them, were our financial system with WinCap. That was a very large concern with our business official, Brian Freeman. So we started to identify that, which really drove the change in order to help us move forward. We've got some gaps. We still have some gaps. While we've been doing this 2 years, these guys make it seem like we've been doing it a long time, and I appreciate that. No, we're still learning from them as we do this. The biggest change that we have to do is we're just trying to be very sympathetic of the culture. As everybody knows, we have a new superintendent, so we're trying to almost dance on eggshells to make change happen in order to protect the district even more. And it's taken us a little bit longer than I'd hoped, but we're getting there one day at a time.
Anything to add, Cindy?
So we actually had, full disclosure, we had interviews with other companies besides Sedara. So in those interviews, we had senior leadership with us in those meetings, which was awesome. And so they knew from the ground floor what Sedara brought to the table. We talk a lot about culture, and one of the things that I think helped senior leadership respect what Sedara does and want to bring them in, is that they understand the culture. They understand that we just can't go in and say, oh, you can't do that anymore because Dilip said so, right? It's more, you know, what is, well, we can say it, but, and we do
He's
say
the
it.
escape
We
route,
do
which
say
is
it.
awesome.
We do.
He brings some
And
serious
that's another
muscle, doesn't he?
positive, right? Because I can say, well, you know, Dilip really doesn't want us to do that. That's kind of awesome, by the way. But he understands that he's trying, while he's spending time in HFL, he's learning the culture. He's listening to what people are doing. He watches what my team does during the day, so he understands the culture of what happens in the department as well. And I think that was a big, so, you know, getting the consensus wasn't that hard because they were in from the beginning.
So you've touched on it a little bit, but once consensus is built within the senior leadership, how do you propagate that culture of change within your district?
Well, we started with them, right? They were in on the interviews, they came to our leadership retreat, Dilip and Derek came to our leadership retreat, spent some time with the team, actually not just in the presentation, but they were learning, they were interacting with us while we were at retreat, which was fun. And just learning how people were and what the culture was. So when we went to opening day presentations and we went to, you know, Dilip would come along with us for those, they understood that it was something that central office wanted us to do. They knew it was important. And he would just come and listen and help people understand this was the path the district was taking. And I don't know, just being able to be there and meet with all the different people and help to get buy-in from everybody is what is making it easier. There's still some pushback, but I think you're going to get that anytime, right?
How about for Webster, Brian?
You know, the biggest thing for us is it's really been focusing on having our people understand the why and really making sure that we're communicating all that all the time when we go to implement something. Right now, we're actively implementing multi-factor authentication with our administrators. So we started the conversation back in August with them as the importance of why we need to do this. We're going to slowly be doing this also with our teachers coming up and with the rest of our staff. So we just try to always lead with the why of what we have to do. And it's also great when we can say, this is what our cybersecurity company recommends based on industry best practice. As Eric said before, it's not the Brian Zimmer, I'm gonna do it just to make it harder on you, because that's what people think. They think tech directors just sit up all night saying, how can I mess with the next person, and how can I do this to make your job harder? No, that's not what we do. And ultimately, you know, what we're trying to do is flip the funnel to have people understand that not only are we trying to keep the district secure, we're trying to keep them secure. And that's the hardest part of the conversation, that because it impacts their abilities of what they can do. You know, installing software. Why do I have to use multi-factor? I can just log in, okay. No, it's not about that. And having them understand, and really, whether they like it or not, we need them to appreciate the impact of what can happen if something goes wrong.
How about Eric?
We started at Central, we've been working almost exclusively with central office groups, human resources, business office, payroll, and the larger stakeholders. School Tool as our SMS. We're looking at those first, those large programs, if you will, or warehouses. It's been really helpful. We start the interview process, so Dilip goes out, like everywhere else, learns what people are doing. It's great because then he comes back and says, you know, guess what?
Did you know?
I found out. Lots of things that we didn't even know in the first place. So that's one aspect of it. He's been going to faculty meetings as well. We got those scheduled for the fall and the spring. So we can give regular updates to teachers. They can hear it, again, not from me, but from Dilip. That's been very, very helpful. And that, again, we're not trying to impede instruction by any means, but we're trying to protect. It's not your computer, it's the district's computer. It's not your email, it's the district's email. It's not your students, it's the district's students. It's our responsibility to protect all of that.
So let's pivot just a little bit to yourselves as senior leaders. Cindy, how has your CDP changed the way you look at compliance? So your cybersecurity development program.
I don't know, that's a tough question. I think that in working with Sedara, it's helped me look at it not as one big chunk of something I have to do, but how we break it up into different chunks and be able to do it in small pieces, and then it makes it not so overwhelming. I guess, I don't know, that was a tough question for me.
Yeah. How about for you, Eric?
Yeah, we've been definitely working with different groups. Like I said, if it's payroll or human resources, we've been focusing on bits and pieces. One of the biggest challenges we had was onboarding and offboarding. And I'm starting to talk like Dilip, which I think that means the program's successful. So when Dilip's not there, I'm going, is this repeatable? Can we do this? There's a gap. Is there compromising control? That's been very helpful to speak in the cyber language, and so when Dilip's not there, the work can continue with our groups independently to make sure that the program's not just one. It's not a one and done once a week for a half a day. That's it. It's kind of now it's ingrained in me. It's in the back of my head. I'm thinking differently around cybersecurity and asking questions before, thinking about it before. How would Dilip answer this? So, what?
Even just like when you said the compromise control, you're like, yeah, I said it. I know what I'm talking about now. The things you know now. How about you, Brian?
You know, for me, my biggest growth piece is understanding the whole picture. You know, there's so many moving parts to our teams and to what we do on a day-to-day basis with technology that, you know, to make sure that we've crossed all the T's and dotted all the I's when it comes to making sure that our equipment's, you know, doing the right things, that our software's doing the right things. You know, and to have those conversations with vendors to say, no, you're missing these pieces in order to keep Webster safe. And you know, I think these guys do it all the time as well when we're looking at, you know, the overall arching factor, whether it's logging into a computer, or whether it's a timeout of a computer, that we have a really good industry standard based answer now, rather than just saying, well, because I said so, and because we know in education that doesn't fly. So we're able to, you know, talk the language a lot better, a lot clearer, you know, and have facts to really back what we're doing, rather than we think this is the right thing. Now we can say we know it's the right thing.
Since all of you folks are involved in a cybersecurity program with Sedara, what is one of the biggest culture changes you had to make for your software acquisition process? Eric, let's start.
So to be honest, we haven't got into too much of the software acquisition process, any new one. We did have a very good one moving up to this prior to the program. Any new software request would have to come through, go through the channels in the building, then I would sign off on it. Now enter EdLaw 2D. Fortunately, we kind of pushed pause during COVID, pre-COVID, during COVID, that, you know, we have enough to deal with right now. There's no new programs. What you have is what you get. And now we're just starting to come out of this with more program requests, new software. So quite frankly, that's the next thing on my list, is to tighten up our software acquisition process through the lens of EdLaw. Is there data being shared? Where is it being shared? By whom? Are they compliant? Did they sign off on the contract? Now the teachers, to them, they don't care, you know, or at this point they're just mad that they can't get the software. But I think this slight change to the acquisition process is necessary. It's a matter of fact, it's gonna happen. We're just taking that on a case-by-case basis right now, I guess.
Sounds good. How about Webster?
For us, it's really made us slow down and look at the purpose of the software and really determine, you know, where does it fall in our overall scope for an instructional lens. Probably like many districts, we've just said, we'll just buy these softwares, we'll try them, we'll give them a good look, and then we never get rid of them. And we never really evaluate them using data to understand how well they're working to improve the instructional lens. So for us, what we've done, we've taken a really comprehensive look where we sit down with our directors of all the instructional areas, and really try to figure out where does this fall as far as meeting standards? How does this help us move the instructional lens forward for kids and also the teachers? So we're trying to go to a really database or a data look and really say, does this help us move the lens forward? COVID hurt us a little bit because we started buying everything under the sun. Anything anybody wanted, because we had all this federal stimulus money, we just went out and bought it. So now we're trying to bring in the reins a little bit, which, like everybody else, it's a little bit tougher. But we're trying to go back to the standard where we're really doing it for the instructional purpose, and really does it meet, the instructional curriculum model that we want, that we have set forward in Webster.
How about for you, Cindy?
Pretty much the same thing. The teachers in HFL had a lot more freedom than most teachers in other districts prior to us working with Sedara, and we actually wanted to start to kind of tighten that up. So bringing Sedara in at that time was perfect because it kind of helped us back it up a little bit. They were used to being able to download anything they wanted, free software. I hate that word. All this free stuff is driving us crazy because we can't get compliance for it, and they don't understand why they just can't download it and use it and do their thing. So it's been a little bit of a shift for them, just trying to understand. But like Brian said, it's all about helping them understand the why we're doing it, not just because we want to be meanies. We just want to keep them safe, and I think that's really helping them start to understand it. We have, the ASI and I have come up with we're calling it a materials request form. So it's covering software, any kind of software, textbooks, trying to incorporate that into one form where there's a clear process for what a teacher needs to do to request to use something. It's longer than obviously what they want because they want to just be able to use it tomorrow. But that is helping, again, because of COVID, we really didn't get to use it as much as we wanted, so we're kind of still in the infancy of that. But I'm hoping that will continue to grow, and I think eventually people will get the idea, once the shock of it's over, the why we're doing what we're doing.
So when you think of your cybersecurity program, why did you decide to outsource your cybersecurity to a vendor, Cindy?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, it was something that we knew we couldn't do on our own. And Sedara brought to the table that teamwork, not just here's what you need to do and I'll see you later, tell me when you're done. It was, I'll be there to help you, I'll help you talk to people, I'll help you get people to understand, and just help us create that plan.
How about you, Eric?
Very similar. Again, we're not cybersecurity experts. Having that, the program in general as a guidance. So I'm not going to be an expert in the NIST framework or controls or everything. I can't think like that every day. So when we sit down, it's been an eye-opening experience. It's been very positive to, learn a different way to think in terms of the cybersecurity piece. We certainly couldn't have done that on our own. None of us could. And you can easily say, well, we'll just hire a cybersecurity expert, which that really doesn't exist. I mean, that for a district, that's impossible. So this is the next best thing, to have regular time and schedule time every week, or it's been flexible in that we can cater to other people's schedules in our organization if they can't meet on our Wednesday, to work with DILUP. Am I rambling?
No, perfect. Brian?
I think the biggest thing for me is, to outsource it meant, it gave me a lot more depth as far as my team, based on the changing landscape of cybersecurity. Many more incidents were happening. We had always hoped and prayed, I think all of us did, that it would never happen to us. But it shifted from if it's going to happen to now when it's going to happen. We know that any district is very, very vulnerable to a cybersecurity incident, and by outsourcing it, we're putting our faith and our stock in our collaborative team with Sedara, rather than this is a Webster problem or this is an HFL problem or a Brighton problem. This is all of our problems where we can collaborate, and we're a lot stronger together. And I think the greatest work that's happened so far is all of us here through DILUP and work through DILUP on what each other's doing so we can bring strength in numbers. And we're developing an approach. It's not only great for Webster, but HFL and also Brighton and future schools that are coming on board, where we're now adding the strength where we can reach out and have that ability. Cindy, Eric, and I talk all the time about what are the different things that we're changing. We're stealing ideas of Brighton, they're stealing ideas from us, and same thing with HFL. And that's really the power of the outsource right now with Dilip and Derek leading that work.
So personally, what are your biggest concerns or challenges with respect to your cybersecurity development program now and in the future, Brian?
Number one is our users. They scare the living crap out of me. I'm going to be brutally honest. 99% of the time, they don't know what they're clicking on. They see something free, and they click on it, and now they've just involved themselves in a phishing attack or into a Trojan or into a cybersecurity attack. I really feel that our infrastructure is really strong, our team is really strong, but I really feel that if we don't continue to push the envelope hard with our users to have them understand what they're doing and why they're doing it, we're going to be always chasing our tails to worry what's that next step going to happen for us and when it's going to happen. And I think that's where we lose a lot of sleep. We've evolved now from seeing other districts in our area that have gone through this to where we're doing constant training, constant phishing attacks in our district, and we're sitting below the industry standard right now with our administrative group. Wait until we roll that out with everybody else, and I know that we're going to be well above that. And so my biggest fear is our users, and that's where I lose a lot of sleep. I have very high confidence in our team, very high confidence in Sedara. The other users in our district scare the living daylights out of me.
How about for you, Eric?
Well, we were fortunate enough to, even years before we even engaged with, or even before AdLaw 2D, we enabled multi-factor authentication on our accounts. So prior to Sedara, we didn't allow teachers, any staff, to install programs on their machines. So fast forward today, I feel like I'm not going to say we're bulletproof, but I feel like we're in a good position. Now it's taking it to the next level, and the fact that it's not a static program, it's evolving. And I guess if I had a concern, which is not really a concern, is that we just keep moving forward with that and keep working with the groups, and you just don't have an interview with someone and then that's done. It's a follow-up, it's constant follow-ups, and that's a huge part of my job is to facilitate, it's not the only part, but to facilitate those talks amongst our different groups, our stakeholders, and to get them, keep pushing them with the program. So like I said, Dilip's only here part of the time, but we need this program to keep going on. It's not Dilip leaves, sweet, we don't have anything else to do. It's constant work. It's never going to go away. So I think that's important to know. Once you start, you can't stop. You're in.
How about for you, Cindy?
I agree. I think it is our users. I think that, my team is learning every time Dilip comes. They're being more aware of what's going on. We're protecting the network, but it's what we don't know is the part that scares me. Training is important. We just need to keep doing it. We don't know what our teachers are doing. They say they're following the rules, but I don't know. That we're still finding software we didn't know was out there. So I think the unknown part scares me, and then the ability for us to be able to keep this momentum going. Is there going to be funding to let us keep it going? Is there going to be buy-in after, full disclosure, I'm not going to be in HFL much longer, I'm retiring. So is the program going to continue? And that, I hope that it does, but currently that's what the fear is the things I don't know yet.
I promise I'm about to change my attention to this side of the table and get you guys off the hot seat. But before I do, one more question. So how has your life been made easier with your current cyber program? Cindy.
Me? I don't know if I'd use the word easier, but I would use the word more confident. So having the knowledge that Sedara brings to us has helped me feel like I'm doing a better job, helping others understand and learn. So I guess confident would be the word. I guess I'm more confident. I wouldn't say it's easier. I don't think our job's ever going to get easier. It's only going to get harder. But being confident in what we're doing, I think, is my key.
How about for you, Brian?
For me, in addition to that confidence, the confidence piece is huge. It's a more focused look. I felt like we were, as a tech director, as a data privacy officer, we were very all over the place. We were very spastic in what we did on a day-to-day basis once we heard EdLaw 2D came out, because none of us had any idea what this was going to mean. So it's really narrowed that focus. It's really helped not only with my education on everything that we do, not only from the cybersecurity lens, but just on general practices. It's helped my team grow. And so our team is a lot stronger because of the conversations and the work we're doing collaboratively with Sedara to help, strengthen what our practices are, what our protocols are, and what our research-based standards are going to be. And that's been where the greatest challenge and greatest growth that we've made in the last 2 years by doing this work, because we're asking questions that we've never asked before. It went from where my team was very timid, and this is not knocking any of my team, very timid about this outside person coming in and saying, well, what are you doing? Mm-hmm. Instead of just me being the critical person all the time saying, we need to do this, we need to do that. Now we're taking a total different approach to how we make changes, what the change process and protocol is, to really understanding, how do we make it repeatable, and how do we make sure that we're, doing everything that we need to make sure it's safe.
What for you, Eric?
Yeah, definitely not easier, but it's been more focused, and it's been a positive way. Before, like all of us, when we heard EdLaw 2D, we were focused on EdLaw 2D. This is just, and that was a foot in the door, but then when you take a step back, there's way more to cybersecurity than student data. So working with Sedara, they make us understand in different examples in different buildings or different industries of what's successful, what's not successful, what's recommended, what's not recommended. Building those, I guess the tools we have now, I have the tools now to work with other areas of our organization to help with the program, the cybersecurity program.
Excellent. So I will shift over here while we pivot a little bit more to risk reduction ideas. Right? So it's getting harder to secure cybersecurity insurance. What strategies can a district that is denied coverage or receives a premium quote nearly equal to the max payout after their deductibles employ to address this challenge? Got all that?
I do. This sort of tests my executive function. I'll hold it in my head and get the answer back out. But yeah, so when you just to take a step back, right? All of cybersecurity and data privacy is about risk reduction, right? And that's what you said, right? When you're turning to it, and obviously insurance is one strategy towards risk reduction. But it doesn't eliminate your responsibility. All it does is it transfers the cost of whatever the adverse thing that you're looking to insure against is covered by someone else. So you're still fundamentally responsible for whatever bad thing happened. You just can look to some insurance carrier to pay that bill, right? So when you think about insurance, right, you're not getting it under the premise of this question. So now you have to look at, well, what risk was I actually trying to eliminate or transfer to the carrier? And schools stand in a slightly different position than a lot of businesses, right? If you think about a school, like if I live in Pittsford, right? And I don't think they're here, so I can pick on them for a second. Oh, they are. Oh, I'm sorry. Wait, well, there you are. Oh, no, shit.
Careful.
I didn't see you at the earlier.
Tread lightly,
But we're
my
friends,
friend. Tread
right?
lightly.
But like, but so like, if Pittsford gets breached, am I going to move to Brighton? Am I going to move to Webster? Am I, maybe, but unlikely, right? I mean, if they'd have me, right? They probably wouldn't. But so like, whereas if a business gets breached, it stands in a different position. So if you're a school, what risk are you actually looking to transfer to the insurance carrier? You know, and all of this is salve, right, to put on a wound, right, because you don't have insurance, right? You want to have insurance because you want to turn to your superintendent and say, this isn't going to cost us anything if a bad thing happens, right? But now you can't, right? So what can you do? Well, look at what you were looking to protect against with the is it your servers bricking? Probably, maybe, right? Is it paying wages? That actually may not be such a big risk for the district, because the taxes will keep happening, revenue will keep coming in, teacher salaries will continue to get paid. You know, more likely is maybe you can't open the doors, right? Because with the systems down, the alarm system doesn't work, the fire systems don't work, the base systems to keep kids in the school don't work. So now you need to have, the kids can't come to school, but is that going to close the school down forever, right? Is that a life terminal event to the school? Probably not, right? So, you have to look and see, well, what risk am I looking to cover, and how is insurance protecting it? And the answer maybe is not much, right? If you look at the premiums on $1 million, it's $500,000. That could buy an awful lot of the equipment that would reduce the risk of whatever it is you were looking to transfer to the carrier in the first place. So you could, if you're not going to spend the money on insurance because they're not willing to take it, take the $500,000, however much it's going to cost, and put it into SIM, put it into better backup systems, make sure there's an air gap in there, do the things that you would do that would allow you to restore and recover faster, so that, you're making, and then, by the way, you do all these things, you're in probably the next question coming up, you're in a better position to get insurance next time it comes around, because you're less risk. So there's a very long-winded lawyer answer to a question, sorry.
But you lead into the next question very well with how you left off. So what steps can a district take to improve its likelihood of receiving a favorable quote for cyber?
Yeah, so obviously, and this is not unique to districts, right? But we see a lot of our clients trying to get cyber insurance at the firm. And I see a lot of the questionnaires, which used to be like 1 page, are now like 90 pages. And probably you guys can talk about this better than I can, but they were 90 pages long, and they're huge, right? And they go into like you're seeing them, right? I mean, they're really in depth, and when so I sort of, well, how can I sort of boil them down? So I was thinking about that, and the first was, obviously improve security, and we heard MFA, awesome, right? MFA is fantastic, and it would get rid of a lot of the risk of ransomware, because, the remote access into a system, the password, they're not hard to guess. If it's, they have like bar drinking games. For women, it's usually the pet's name with some date followed it. And for men, it's a wife or girlfriend's number with some number following it. And you can almost, and I love this on Facebook, there's some random thing, what's the year of your birth, right? And everyone starts providing it. And it's like, you morons, they're just fishing for passwords. Or who's your, what's the name of your wife, right? And they're like, hundreds of people answer these things on it. And it's like, how does that go? But anyhow, they keep doing that stuff. Getting MFA would reduce the risk of someone guessing your password. They still might guess the password, but they need that second factor to get in. But it doesn't eliminate all of it, right? Because, there's other ways to get into systems than passwords. Sometimes you can go to a website and download content, and that content can run on your machine and get in, right? So MFA is one way that's really good. I see, for a lot of our clients and a lot of folks that have been turned down, they have too many domain admins, and it's really easy if you're on the help desk to have all the privileges in the world, because you never need to ask someone to help you on something. But the reality is, people get too many privileges too fast, and they change jobs, they change roles, and they keep the privileges because no one wants to give up their privileges. If you can limit the number of privileged accounts on the domain, it really will reduce a lot of that risk. And then be really leery of these remote desktop type things, because once you get in, you can pivot to anywhere else, and these are. And when you look at every one of these applications, they're asking questions around those things. So there's a whole bunch of controls for the CSF wonks in the room, that go to these issues. And if you implement those controls, and I know, Mike's system has them all identified, that'll go on reducing those risks, right? Improved monitoring is sort of, if you think about implementing and monitoring, that's something, another area. If you look at the questionnaires, and I've got these down to 3, so you can sort of count them off and know how much longer you have to listen to me. But the, endpoint protection, it's sort of, antivirus was sort of the gold standard. Everyone had to, Norton or whatever, but that's probably not enough anymore. These SIM systems are, and I know, Sedara has that, and, who wants to look at the logs 24/7? I mean, that's the other thing I see. Every one of my clients had logs that let me know how bad their breach was, but very few of them were looking at it beforehand. It's sort of always on the retroscope after the event to figure out how many notices I got to send out. But these logs actually occur in real time, and if you can see the event happening, you can sometimes shut it down before it gets too bad. And that's where a SIM comes in, especially if the groups that are monitoring it are empowered to segment and cut off the network and stop it from propagating.
Yeah, I think and thanks to the panel, I feel like it's a eulogy and I'm no longer living and everybody's saying yes, so it's, I thank you for the panel like that, but honestly it's Sedara, what I learned from, what we go through is just a philosophy from Sedara's standpoint, so I'll get that passed out of it, but the questionnaires, I think, years ago for cyber insurance was 5 questions, do you have antivirus? Do you have a security person? Do you have any policies and procedures? A couple very basic questions.
Do you own a firewall?
Do you own a firewall? Yeah,
Whether it's in place or not, it doesn't matter.
That's right. Do you have a physical security guard standing in front of your data room? The data room's gone. These questionnaires are now 80 questions plus. And half of them deny you coverage if you say yes in the wrong ones. So, kind of going through that process, and, maybe Derek, you could speak a little bit how that's changed. There was no governance from a district level until EdLaw, and EdLaw had one line in it that said the CSF, you shall adhere to the CSF 1.1. One line which said, you now need a cybersecurity team, was the underlying of that. But maybe, Derek, just how that changed, from your incident, and we've kind of gone through these incident responses, and we're on the other side of, when an insurance company's coming to us and we're trying to support a customer and say, well, did you turn on MFA? Did you like that? So maybe kind of just go through that a little bit yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it's obviously a very broad topic. There's a lot of things that go into these questionnaires, and as it's already been said a couple times, they're getting longer and longer. And, multiple pages or dozens of pages is really not out of the norm, and it's getting, we're seeing it change literally month by month. We even, I'll give even an example. We've worked with a couple other districts on, I'll say the report that was presented to them when they went to just renew their coverage, right? Same policy, just renewing for another year. And I say report because there's a questionnaire, but they also delivered a report to say, all right, well, we actually went and did all of our homework about the district on all of this public-facing stuff that's available. So all of the public-facing web servers that are out there, all the websites you own, all the VPN remote access, as well as anyone that has a district email address that may have been, may or may not have been a victim of a breach in another area. So pick on LinkedIn, for example. They had a breach a couple years ago where all their usernames and passwords were stolen. So if anyone used a district email to also use LinkedIn, then all of a sudden, and especially if it's the same password, you could never prove that was the case. But the insurance companies look at that and say, all right, well, this person still works at the district. That's their email address on LinkedIn from 4 years ago. You can't, unless you can prove to me that they've changed their password without a shadow of a doubt, we're considering that a stolen password, and they have to prove that it was reset, prove you have a policy to enforce that, prove multi-factor, and if that's not the case, that's a no to the wrong answer, and you just may get denied coverage on a renewal. And again, they weren't looking for higher premiums or weren't looking for better coverage. They were looking to renew the exact same coverage they already had in place. And within the period of 12 months, they were given a much larger questionnaire and then had to answer all of the questions on this report. And that's one example. This report was like 12 pages. It was a pretty substantial amount of data, and it took a long time to actually pour through this and tie that back to all the things that we put in place from a policy and procedure standpoint, but also a technology and monitoring standpoint, to be able to present an answer to every single facet of that report. And it is getting more and more challenging. And one of the things, other things I'll say is I think we heard a lot about our approach and the concepts and policies and procedures and how it pushes into all the different departments. At the same time, Sedara, under the hood, is a very technical company. We do 24/7 monitoring, so implementing some of these tools, and we're doing that for districts today. So when we implement these tools, we are watching for these things on a 24/7 basis. And at the same time, it's helping to answer all of these questions through the questionnaires as well. So you're really inherently covering a lot of these when you're going through, kind of the ed law program. Some of these questionnaires, it's almost to the point where you're basically filling out the CSF framework to submit as the questionnaire.
Yeah, absolutely. And, for a point, do not fill out your questionnaire and send it off to your underwriter, the person who's going to deny your coverage. So definitely go through that process. And you don't have to fill out their questionnaire the way you want. You actually can refuse that. So it's something that you feel comfortable with your program, say what you want to say, and what you feel comfortable what you're doing. Because if you're using somebody else's questionnaire and you're not actually using what you believe you're doing, the discrepancy can be something that'd be very challenging for you to defend against. That's kind of one of the reasons when we're talking about district employees, non-district employees. LinkedIn's a great example. Not to use a district email for things that are not district like that. So classifying even your staff, your part-time staff, your teachers, your food services, all like that. Are they an employee or are they not an employee? And defining what that is, and it helps with insurance as well. So I'll let you go to the next question though.
So a few times it's come up today, the R word, right? So what is the most important things school districts can do to protect themselves against ransomware?
Yeah, so this kind of a loaded question. Yeah, obviously it's one of those ones that's definitely top of mind for a lot of people, and unfortunately we've seen it come up in the news more and more, both locally and just across the world. Ransomware is one of those interesting ones because it's done by groups of people that are obviously financially driven. But it usually starts with unapproved entry into an environment. So it just happens to be that ransomware is the most lucrative path for them to take rather than going and stealing all the data. So fundamentally, it's still a very, very similar problem that you're trying to solve from an ed law perspective and a CSF perspective as well. And I think the important factor there is that it's not really about technology. And I think there's just, if you go look at, just Google how to prevent ransomware. Everything's going to lead you to, you got to buy the next blinky light, the next best product, the next, best technology or antivirus or this firewall can prevent all ransomware. And fundamentally, it's just not true. It really comes back to having sound policies and procedures and practices, and then auditing yourself against it, and then you throw some monitoring on for people to actually be able to respond to this at 3 a.m. That's a next level, but ultimately, you're better off taking called an antivirus program. Anyone, pick one. Pick the cheapest one, a free one from Microsoft. If you deployed that to its fullest potential and guarantee 100% coverage, and you're monitoring it, you're better off with something that's free, that you have better practices around, than you would be buying the most expensive endpoint product out there and having no practices or policies around it. Because chances are there's going to be systems that are missing it, it doesn't have the right policies, it's not configured properly, notifications don't go out right. So technology is not really the answer, it's really about the approach. I'll give another example too. We did, unfortunately, we work a lot of ransomware. We have had to deal with a lot of ransomware incidents in districts as well as commercial environments. We worked one several months ago where we had gone through the logs. We had basically kind of done a full analysis of what had gone on. Turns out we had proven they were in the environment for about 30 days, got the password for their antivirus system, and went in and just put policies to allow all the ransomware to run. Because they didn't have multi-factor set up on their endpoint management console. So fundamentally, they bought very, very expensive antivirus software, and the attackers came in and just whitelisted all their applications and let them run. And when they were ready to pull the trigger, they did it about 2 o'clock in the morning, and it just ran. And but it came back to policies and procedures and having sound practices. And, they could have, would have been much better off taking a different approach to it and different technology. And it's definitely a lot more to it than that, but it's a tough problem to solve, that's for sure.
Okay. So, in the work across the region and certainly across the state, what activities are you hearing about from the comptroller's office? Alan, anything?
Alan, go ahead, Alan.
So they are going around. I couldn't have printed this smaller. I don't know if I tried, and I'm getting so old now. But here's like the requests. A lot of the requests are coming down to the policy documents. Going to your point about people, policy, procedures, right? There's a lot of requests for the policies around access controls, passwords, things like that. All of the, for the CSF people, all of the families that are in the NIST 853 framework, right? So basically, if you were to implement the 853 framework and align that to the CSF, which is the requirement of Part 121, which is the regulation implementing EdLaw 2D, because EdLaw 2D, by the way, has been around for many, many, many years. No one cared about it until there was a regulation that suddenly made it real. But and there's the regulation that threw in the CSF. All of those policy docs that come out of those 853 families will cover like the overwhelming majority of the requests that at least we're seeing. They do have other questions like evidence that a SIM tool is in place. They do ask for stuff like actual training logs to show that people have been receiving the awareness training and stuff like that. They do have inventory of your systems. But again, if you're doing the 853 family and you're going through the CSF implementation, you're going to cover pretty much everything that they're asking for, and we'll have the documents. I think they're going to start. My guess would be if they, and I don't know if the people there, know enough cybersecurity to go this far, but they are going to start wanting to see procedures around the controls. I think in the next level to see that people not just have the controls, which are awesome if you do. It's such a great thing seeing if you go from sort of doing security to having a program around security. You have controls, now you suddenly have a program, right, that you can measure, test, and evaluate. If you have procedures then to execute and implement on those controls, you've gone the next level, right, that you can make sure it's happening consistently. And I suspect that's where they're going to go next. But right now is, do you have documentation showing that you're doing it at some level?
Yeah, I mean, do what you say what you're doing, that kind of stuff. So if you're doing something, it doesn't exist without a policy or procedure to an auditor in some extent. So you might as well get credit for what you're doing, and you might as well actually, set limits, set appropriateness to what you're doing. 853 is massive, but, show your maturity level of where you are as well. So obviously there's certain things from an auditor or controller standpoint they're going to audit, showing we call it a POAM, it's a plan of action and milestones, something that you want to go and continually moving forward. So Derek may call it low-hanging fruits as well, attack those things first. It doesn't have to be you shall start the CSF at the very top and you're done in a year and away you go. You need to attack it for any of your PMs out there, in agile versus waterfall. You want to attack it in an agile way as well. So, waterfall can be top, bottom from a technology. Agile can be, where's your low-hanging fruit. So I think that's the things that are coming soon down from the state.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Are there, we'll pivot maybe to the questions that, right, or?
Yeah. Alan said he's going to offer any free legal advice for tonight as well. So.
And it'll be worth exactly what
yeah. And so, yeah. I knew it. Told you to say it.
Questions from the crowd?
Somebody has to have one.
No, somebody has to have one question.
Like, how do you grow a beard that long?
Yeah. COVID.
Or does anybody want to comment on?
Not having it, just living 2
Yeah,
years
living
with it.
living through COVID. Yeah, exactly.
Just to be clear.
Yeah.
Would anybody like to comment about what they're doing within their district right now? Lou, I know you're here. You and I were talking about some different things that you've seen over at Brighton.
I think what I would offer from the business official perspective and from the HR perspective, is that this is transaction-based. So the questions that Dilip is asking is really, Eric said it and the whole team said it, it's making us look at our business practices from soup to nuts, onboarding and offboarding, looking through that, all the different transactions and who we're bringing into our schools, just things that we're not in that far into the weeds that they're asking those questions. And you know when Dilip's interviewing you, you know when you're saying the wrong thing. It's like, tell me about how you do this. Well, that was a lousy answer. So I knew what was coming just from the interview. So it's been great. I have an audit background, and this is a different type of audit, but it's a value add audit in every aspect that I've participated on so far.
Yeah.
Good afternoon or good evening. It's a question for the tech directors. What were some of the early activities that you took on with this side of the table when you started your process? I heard that Webster probably was first, Brighton, and then HFL, but we're moving forward with Sedara in our district, so what can I expect from the first month to 6 months, or was it put on your shoulders to decide that?
So the first 4 months, 5 months, we were doing a full audit of our current practices. Dilip and the team would come in, and each week he would ask the same question 4 or 5 different ways. He'd want to know, initially he spent a lot of time with me asking, not only like we just talked about with the business sense, but what are we doing from a full programmatic sense? Then the questions moved into the team came in. We started talking about what do we do from a technical side. We've moved into, looking at our inventory practices, to our asset management, to our password management. So it's really, to me, it was a lot of thought-provoking work. He led us to some things to where we were, challenging our practices, but also thinking about ways we could move them forward. Every Thursday when he's there, I'm exhausted when we're done. So I'm just going to tell you that right now. I don't know about these guys, but after the 4 hours with Dilip, 3 or 4 hours, I'm ready to go home for the day. Just because I have limited brain power left after the work that we're doing, and it's the right work. It's very thought-provoking. It's going to push you in a different light, Jeff, to think about things that, you may not know about your district, or you may, and you just are like, now how do I move this forward? And it gives you a lot of different insight to the whole different perspective of everything from the board level all the way down to our basic user, and how do we keep them secure and safe while doing the best things.
I guess for us, it was, we've just started, we've only been doing this since we thought April. It seems like a much longer time, but it's really only been since April. And it's just been, meeting with the team, like Brian said. He's starting to meet with other people to figure out how the place works, right? And so, what kinds of things are we doing? I actually sat in a meeting with him when he met with the HR team. I said, I'm not going to go to any more meetings, because the things that they were saying I knew were wrong. And so after the meeting, I said, that's not right, right? He's like, yeah. But it was just that learning piece of just learning how the district's working, learning how people think they know what they're talking about. And more of it was like, people would say, well, why does Dilip need to meet with me? It's a technical thing. He's your guy. And so just getting that, helping him being in there, helping people understand that it's not just about the technical piece. And we haven't got much further than that. We're doing a lot of internal things department-wise with the network and that's the other piece of it. And trying to do some training plans is the thing we've been working on. But for all of us, I think each of us are at a little different level. And even though we're at that different level, we're still working on different projects, whatever seems to be the thing that we need to focus on in our district.
Definitely, excuse me, during those first few weeks of interviews, we started tech. Then we kind of branched out. We were a little stronger on the tech side, and that's the nice part of this, is that he can customize the direction in which you want to go. There's no right or wrong way, but you kind of say, all right, you guys are okay on this side in respect to XYZ, multi-factor, good. All right, but you're a little weaker over here. Maybe it's onboarding, offboarding, a little. So meeting with those other key stakeholders, the keeper of School Tool, the keeper of WinCap, the keepers of all these large programs that are data warehouses. Start with the big stuff and kind of, again, every path was different. I'm sure I know for all three of us, we went in different directions immediately. But it was customizable. It is a lot of, I won't say it's a lot of work. It's good work. It's good. It's very thoughtful. Again, after I spend even the 4 hours turns into more, a day, it's almost a whole day of work. When Dillo comes out, it's very good and thoughtful. We're exhausted by the end of the day. And then you have to do everything else that you missed out on while you're focused. It's not something you can just do when you're engaged with them or working with different groups of people. It's not like you can be on your phone and I'm going to do other things. Really behooves you to stay focused with the
I think if I could
tasks at hand.
sum it up in one word, is just pivot, right? Where's your problems? Pivot to your problems. Cybersecurity is a weird thing. You sign up for cybersecurity even if you don't know you are, right? So if you're implementing something, you're going live with something, you have a set process, you plan, you pilot, and you go live. You're live with cybersecurity from day one you take the job as a DPO. And so you're trying to protect and build a program at the same time. And by far, every three of them had very different strong points and then different points of where we need to go. And so if you're building a program, I think it's just know what you're doing, do it strong, document it, and then pivot to where you know your weaknesses are. So it's very different for each one of them. So.
And I don't mean any of that to be negative. It's very positive.
You could be negative, that's okay.
Yeah, but it also comes down to, Dilip and I talk about this all the time, where as tech directors, we try to solve every problem, even though we can't. Yeah. And so we try to take everything on, even though, like we look at onboarding. We've got a major mess with onboarding. That's really not a technology problem, but it impacts technology in every single way on our day-to-day interactions with people we hire, we remove, and people that retire. So it all starts with us, but ultimately, we need to fix the fundamental core values of what other departments are doing that we can't fix. They have to fix it on their own. So instead of us being the bad guys, we're letting Dilip become the bad guy. And that's been working extremely well.
I also think it's a piece of, we're fixers, so we want to fix everything, right? That's what we do. And Dilip will say, that's not your problem to fix, right? And then we'll talk about whose problem it is to fix. And I know that in my mind, but in reality, I just want to fix it. It's just that somebody else helping us understand, maybe this isn't your problem. It might be your problem a little bit, but there's more people involved.
Other questions, comments?
I'm showing up as Dilip for next Halloween, just so you know. That's my comment. But.
I'd love to see the beard.
Awesome. I'm going to put people on the spot. How about anything from Hilton?
Come on,
Veronica?
Johnny Miller.
Awesome.
Yeah, I'm fine in the microphone. I talk kind of quiet. So, just a quick question for you guys. What was the kind of response you got from your team when you first started this? I know Brian mentioned you already have so much on your plate, like every other IT department has. When you came to them and said, this is what we have to do, these are all the parts, what kind of, did you get support? Did you get pushback? Did you get whining? Like, how did that go? You mentioned that at first they were a little reluctant to have Sedara come in. If you could just comment on that.
It was really about reservation, that you have somebody coming in and looking at your practices. And it took, in my team, and Bill sitting here, Bill, we have very receptive, growth-minded people. It just, we always, including me, it takes a little while to understand why we're doing this. And, we had the conversation a lot about building our team with a team approach where we were doing some movement. Also to have them understand that we can't do this on our own. And we spend a lot of time talking about that. Because my guys know I don't want to put more on them. We're already stretched so thin that it came down to the conversation of, why don't we let somebody else handle it, let the experts handle it. But now what we've done is we've evolved to where we're having culture conversations about our team. We're doing a lot of different pieces to really strengthen what Webster does and probably what HFL and Brighton does as well. And, we've gone from reluctance, and, one of the challenges with reluctance was my network administrator that was in charge of everything. Not that he doesn't do a great job. He does a phenomenal job. But it just, we're now trying to take that to the next level and really broach on that growth mindset conversation rather than, we've got all these things that are wrong. We don't have things that are wrong. We are making tweaks and we're making enhancements to, look at every single piece of our operation, some things that we're really sloppy at. And it's just making us refine our overall approach and really focus. It goes back to that focused approach. And, it's hard because you're under a microscope at first. And I started to go through that thing of, is this the right thing? And, after the second or third meeting with Dilip and his team was like, yeah, this is the right thing because they're helping me evolve into the appropriate questions on, what my team should be doing rather than all of these plugging cables all the time and just running around and doing the ancillary stuff. We're really starting to get into that focused work.
Christine, that's an awesome question because technicians, I think in general, somebody coming in, the first thing is they're going to come in and tell me all the things I'm doing wrong, and then they're going to leave.
And I'm going to get fired.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so part of what Dilip did when he first came was he kind of he met with all of them and he learned some of their strengths and some of their quirkiness. And I think the more he comes and works with them, the more they're understanding that there's a benefit to this. Somebody's not just telling me what to do. They're helping me understand why I have to do it. And then actually looking at, one other thing we're doing is like looking at all of their job responsibilities. And maybe my network admin shouldn't be out hanging interactive boards, right? We do it because we have to, but is that really what we want them to do? And I think that came with trust after he had been there a few times, but the initial was, oh my God, this guy's gonna come in and tell me all the things I'm doing wrong, and I don't wanna hear it. But it didn't take long for him to warm up to all of them.
For us, it wasn't a huge lift. Initially, we met with all the techs in a group, or individually first and then as a group, and try to pull out the strengths and weaknesses of each tech. And what's been drilled in my mind is that we can't have a single point of failure. If we have one person that's too strong on something, we want to spread not necessarily the risk, but responsibilities around. So we've been working on cross-training so it's not one tech responsible for one thing. We possibly have two or three who are familiar. We have an owner of the application or technology, and then you have a sponsor. So there's more people. We're trying to assign names to those people. Quite frankly, we haven't pushed on that. So we have so few techs right now, and just for an example, like today, we're 3 techs that are out. So we don't have a lot of opportunity now for training techs per se, but I don't think there was any standoffishness. It was just a quick understanding of what the overall goal of the program was. It wasn't at ease, be at ease. You're not going to lose your job. You're not going to lose control of something. I guess in our district, I'm a tech too, so we're working with Dilip on a lot of these things directly on a high level in terms of the tech components, I guess.
Thank you. Over here. Oh, you betcha.
Everybody gets
be
free drink.
amazed how I can work numbers. Yeah, that's my gift.
So it can all go through BOSI. So.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, so before we get to the next thing, which is Jeopardy, then after Jeopardy, Michelle will close us out and we will go. But I guess I wanted to just make one comment that I find so interesting here is I remember my first meeting going back about 2.5 years ago with Brian. I mean, I went into, well, actually, you guys were remodeling. I think we were in a fort or something like that. I don't even remember, because it was a real dinky little room and everything. But the point was, we went in there to talk about SIM technology. And that conversation lasted about 20 minutes. Because all of a sudden, Brian kind of changed the narrative, and we started to understand that, we really have to look at that program effect, with the district. And I really felt that that was so interesting. And if we had to do this Fireside Chat 2.5 years ago, I think it would have had a much different look. I mean, you think about what we've talked about today, okay, is really not so much around the technology. Hey, by the way, the SIM technology, logarithms, one of the best in the world. Okay, that stuff's fantastic. But what we talked about, and the major thing that I got out of this is really based around, talk a little bit about risk, compliance, but really about culture, within the district. And that's where the change really comes about. And I don't think we can really underemphasize that enough. And I have to tell you, I thank the folks up front, because they have done an unbelievable job. Because like we said, we have, Sedara's there 4 hours. I mean, we're there a little bit, and I think the job, but the real key is the job that these folks have done and with the responsibility and their teams have taken. And frankly, we can't thank you enough for that. And I hope your districts understand that. So anyways, I just wanted to point that out. It was just such an interesting dynamic over the course of the couple of years. And guys, thank you on that side.